what my legal advisor was telling Shelley is basically the severity of the situation, and Pastor Shelley, he started to understand it. What was started happening is he wanted to talk to me personally instead of going through my legal advisor. And he started sending me texts, like kind of like trying to make amends and trying to somehow fix things without having to talk to the legal advisor. And I just kept blowing him off and not answering his text messages and making it clear that he had to go through my legal representatives for everything. And uh, automatically on Saturday, he wanted to make an agreement.
Welcome back to the Rediscover People podcast. My name is Wally De La Fuente, and today we have a special video for you. There's been a lot of controversy happening in the NIFB, lots of different things going on with Pastor Steven Anderson, of course, but then also with Pastor Jonathan Shelley. And now today we're talking to Pastor Salvador Alvarez. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and what your connection is with everybody?
Yes, my name is Pastor Salvador Alvarez. I am recently ordained pastor, ordained September 1st, pastor of Pure Words Baptist Church, and Pastor Jonathan Shelley, the one who ordained me. And from what I believe, from what I can tell, I am the first person to be ordained by someone Pastor Steven Anderson ordained.
Okay, so you're saying you're not directly from Steven Anderson, but someone that he ordained is now ordaining someone that's you. You might be the first person.
That's right. Yeah, from what I understand, I am.
And how did you get to know them? How did you get ordained through them?
So I was listening to Pastor Steven Anderson and Pastor Jonathan Shelley sermons from Puerto Rico around. I think the first sermon I heard from Pastor Anderson was around 2016, and then later on as the years went by, I kind of went back and forth listening to him, and then in 2020, I moved myself and my family to Stedfast, Oklahoma City, Stedfast OKC over there in Oklahoma, and I was over there, slowly started getting integrated in that church, uh, leading music. Around after like a year after I got there, I started helping out preaching, and around fall or summer of 2023 last year, and Pastor Jonathan Shelley asked me if I would be interested in becoming the pastor of Pure Words Baptist Church, and then slowly things started moving towards that direction. And in January 1st of this year, 2024, I moved to Houston, and I was already ordained evangelist in December before moving. But I moved to Houston. I became the evangelist of Pure Words Baptist Church, and then got ordained later on September 1st.
So was Pure Words Baptist Church a church that was already established there? Was it already there and he was looking for a pastor to go there, or were you planting this?
Well, actually, Pure Words Baptist Church is a church that Pastor Jonathan Shelley started himself in the year 2018. He was sent by Pastor Anderson to start the church in Houston before the whole Donnie Romero thing happened. Then when the whole Donnie Romero thing happened, then he took over as pastor for Stedfast over there in Dallas. And Pure Words really became kind of a church plant in the way that he had to keep sending people to preach there or find someone on site to be able to preach and be the boots on the ground. So that process, the whole process since the church started till me getting ordained was around 6 years. That was in 2018.
Okay, so what were the qualifications that he thought were necessary for you to be ordained to be pastor there?
Well, all the qualifications in First Timothy 3 and Titus, um, he said that I met all of those, and that besides that, he was commending me. From what I understand, he only spoke well of me to everyone, and I know that he really valued my work ethic as far as like that I could pay my own bills. I think that is one of the major factors to why he chose me to become the pastor of Pure Words, is because he knew that with putting me as pastor that I could, through my secular job, just pay my own bills and not be a financial burden to Pure Words, so that Pure Words could actually become independent.
Okay. During your ordination, can you just give me what that process looks like? Okay, so he approaches you. You're going to. He thinks you meet the qualifications. Does he give you anything? Like, does he talk to you about it? Does he tell you, hey, these are the reasons why you would be disqualified if you ever do this or if you ever do that? Anything like that at all? Or
What happened was, he pretty much like after the first year of me being in Stedfast OKC, I preached in a Mighty Men's Retreat. Basically, it's like a men's conference, and he liked my sermon, and he contacted me afterwards and asked me if I could preach at Stedfast OKC. And I said yes, that I'd love to preach. I've always had a great joy in preaching. At that moment as well, he asked me if I was ever interested to become a pastor. And actually, I did have the desire for a long time already. I actually in Puerto Rico, I grew up in an independent fundamental Baptist school. Is where I got saved in the school in Puerto Rico. It was like a missionary school, and I actually went through that whole process. Went through the whole school, middle school, high school, graduated, and I went to the same Bible college, the local Bible college that that church had, which is not a big Bible college, but it was really out of all the Bible colleges out there, it was the best Bible college. There was not that many corruptions, high standards, KJV only, like all that good stuff. And so I already had a desire to become a pastor one day, just because I knew of the need for pastors. And Pastor Shelley, he approached me about that like after a first year of me being a Steadfast OKC, but didn't really dwell on that too much. I kept preaching for around 2 years. I never asked him to become a pastor. I had never, not one time, approached him and asked him if I could preach either. He's always been the one who come to me and asked me about these things. And even after those 2 years, then he approached me about if I wanted to become a pastor again. He didn't at first say Pure Words. He wasn't really clear as to where I was going to be a pastor, so I didn't really know where, if I was going to be sent out or if I was going to become a pastor. I really had no idea, and I didn't bother him about that because to me, it's like he preaches as well, which is true. That someone who wants to become a pastor should not be self-willed. That they shouldn't feel like they have to be a pastor, because that would be a self-will, and it's kind of a false. It's a red flag, really.
so they shouldn't put themselves up above, right? They shouldn't be putting themselves as a pastor.
Right, right. It should be someone else who sees you and sees that you meet those qualifications, preferably an already qualified pastor. And so another step throughout the whole thing was I did have to take a test. I did have to take like a Bible knowledge test. There are some general qualifications that he and even Pastor Anderson have said, like you have to have read the Bible 7 times, you have to be soul winning, obviously. You have to have been married for so many amount of years. I'm not sure about all of Pastor Jonathan Shelley's requirements as far as all that goes, but I met all of those. One of them is having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. And for Pastor Shelley's view on that verse is that you have to have two children at least, and the youngest of those two children has to be at least 2 years old, at least a toddler, like at least old enough to where someone can see you and you have some semblance of, hey, yes, faithful children that are behaving in service and are not accused of riot or unruly. So I met all of those, and I took the Bible test. I passed the Bible test. The Bible test, it wasn't really a grade. It was kind of like a pass or fail, and he just saw as like, okay, pass. Questions on that were like how many times we read the Bible. Certain. I'm not gonna give all the
Right.
questions out, of course. 'Cause I don't want people cheating on the test later. But but yeah, stuff like that.
I ask because it's right now we're talking about a lot of what could disqualify a pastor, what first qualifies them, then how could they possibly be disqualified. And Pastor Anderson has gone to other churches before where he's told the congregation, and this is on video, you might want to keep this pastor, but he's too bad, he's disqualified and he's gone. They ever give
Right.
you any indication of what those reasons might be that you could be disqualified at any point in time?
Well, from what was understood, he didn't really tell me or give me a list of anything. But I mean, I think it was pretty generally understood that if I ever got divorced, I would be disqualified, and if my Well, that was never really told besides that, so all the rest of it would be assumptions.
Yeah, I guess the reverse of First Timothy 3, right? Like if you stop doing those things, maybe that would disqualify you, maybe, or stop being that person.
Yeah, I would assume so. That's what anyone with just a common sense and just looking at the Bible at face value would determine. But
Okay. So now let's fast forward a little bit. So you've been a pastor there now since what? When did you say? Since September?
September 1st was like a month, like a month and a half, I guess, right now.
Okay. Okay. So within that time, have you seen any kind of, because of everything that's going on, any kind of like church decline? Do you still have people at your church? How's the church
Yeah,
functioning right now?
there is an exaggeration as far as the church decline goes, because there was a church decline as leading up to and after my ordination. There was church growth. Actually, in the month of September, we had 7 baptisms. We had a lot of visitors. We had attendance up. But then, because of all the false accusations and misinformation against me online, a lot of families have been poisoned against me, so that attendance has declined, but it's not too much. It's not so much of the extent as some people are putting it out to be. Some people are saying that we're now on like 10% capacity of what we used to be, which is just a joke. And here's the thing about Pure Words Baptist Church: is Pure Words Baptist Church has a lot of members on paper, like a lot of people who've come to church before, but it has very few faithful families that'll be there every single service, and even few faithful families that'll be there every week. Like, just people come in and out all the time. If everyone came all at once, it'd be like 150 people. But the average for the whole year is 25 right now, which is like we're not too far off from our attendances. Our attendances right now are not too far off from that. Like, just a few people less than that right now.
Okay, so now let's get into the current controversy of what's been going on, right? So everybody's seen the videos. Maybe some people have seen your answer to it. I'm sure people have seen Pastor Shelley's reasoning, but can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Okay, I don't know how far back you want me to go, because I mean, it could, as far as my contention with Pastor Shelley, with all this going on with Pastor Anderson, or just the recent Friday event.
I think I think the thing with Pastor Anderson kind of begins it as to why the thing on Friday
Yeah.
happened, right? So let's start with Anderson. What were the disagreements you may have had about that, and how did that go down?
Okay, so the thing with the Anderson children is I already saw Isaac Anderson's interview before I was ordained, and I preached a sermon about it, actually, called Biblical Spanking. It was in the month of June, and it's in the old channel called Pure Words Baptist Church Live. And I preached the whole sermon against basically what the accusations he was making against his father, about abuse, too much abuse in the home. It was about corporal punishment, how we should have a reasonable amount of corporal punishment, but not go too extreme. And so Pastor Shelley and Pastor Anderson and anybody could see that video, see that sermon of me, and they'll see that my position has not changed or moved since that video. Like, it's been the same. So after that, after my ordination, I was ordained September 1st. September 6th, John's interview drops, and I didn't really pay attention to it or know about it until Pastor Shelley made a video defending Pastor Anderson around like 2 weeks later, and that's when I started looking into all the interviews and everything that was going on. And just already having those two witnesses, I was super skeptical and thinking that the witnesses were probably true, because I mean, what would make two children to go against their parents in such a great way if none of it was true? And just listening to the phone conversation between John and Pastor Anderson, and him admitting to things in that. So basically, I had already set my mind straight that whenever a third witness came out, I was going to say something, because I was remembering the Bible verse that says, "Against an elder, receive not an accusation, but before two or three witnesses." So in my mind, it was like I have two witnesses, so I could say something already. But when the third witness comes out, if I wait till the fourth one comes, then I'm too late.
Right.
And I understand that verse, that what that verse can be applied as meaning is that you don't just accept everything the witnesses say, but that's where you start an investigation. But when I saw Miriam's interview and I saw the response of Pastor Anderson, I automatically saw that he was not accepting those three witnesses against him, and he was not accepting an investigation, but instead he was trying to silence the witnesses and was trying to silence evidence. And so that's why I made that same night Miriam's interview came out, I made a statement for my church, even though I knew Pastor Shelley's stance was different on it. But I did have enough respect before I made that post on Facebook. I did have enough respect for Pastor Shelley to call him and not to ask his opinion because we were independent already, obviously. But I had enough respect to call him and talk to him about everything that was going on. And I was suggesting to him that he should not keep defending Pastor Anderson because it could turn out to be against him later on. And he even confessed to me, which I put out in a video recently, he even confessed to me that he couldn't see how the witnesses could be lying. He couldn't see how what Pastor Anderson was doing was right.
Thanks a lot. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties. We had a little air noise, some internet drop, but we're back here with Pastor Salvador Alvarez. I want to pick up where you were talking about that you were going to release a statement to your church, right? And you decided to call Pastor Jonathan Shelley. And you said that he kind of agreed that maybe the kids were not lying. Can you repeat that for us, please?
So Pastor Anderson, he preached a sermon on spousal corporal punishment. And so during the weekend, I made posts against him. I made like 6 posts going against that sermon specifically, debunking his points in that sermon. And I made 1 post against spousal corporal punishment. Because one thing that I did notice when talking with Pastor Shelley over the phone before I made the statement is that he didn't automatically condemn spousal corporal punishment, and that he was saying that there were some instances where it could not be condemned. And so I kind of made those six posts against corporal punishment and 1 against spousal corporal punishment, which is just really abuse. Whatever, all of those are just really abuse. And then I put those out, and on Sunday I made a statement to my church, and the church statement that I made was that it was a separate church, that things that they didn't really involve us. So, but that I was separating ourselves from this whole situation because of the controversy and because I didn't believe the statements Pastor Anderson was making. And so I kind of understood that Pastor Jonathan Shelley had the same idea I did from my phone conversation with him, as far as that Pastor Anderson wasn't blameless in all this. But then on Monday, he put out a statement, and in that statement, he was really defending Pastor Stephen Anderson. And in that statement as well, he was calling those who like make a stand for abuse, he was calling them virtue signalers, because in his mind, he was saying that of course everybody stands against abuse. Like, so why would you even say that? And so after he made that statement, I made other posts being more specific as to what I thought the abuse was. I shared a video about pain raters, where they're rating the pain of an electrical cord, and I made it very clear, saying whoever punishes their kids using electrical cords, that's abuse. And I made other statements. I shared the testimonies of Solomon and Isaac and John and Miriam. I made a playlist and I shared it.
Were those the ones from Dead Domain?
No, I only shared the ones that did not have Dead Domain, basically.
Okay, got it.
Dead Domains was not on Dead Domain's channel, because I kind of wanted to debunk the whole argument that just because a sodomite is interviewing them, that everything they're saying is false, which is just a bad argument, because I watched those interviews. You can just skip the parts you don't like. It's not like you have to stay there looking at that freak or looking at that person. Sorry, I don't want to get you nuked.
Well,
and
so you shared the ones we did then, right?
Yes,
okay,
I shared your interviews. I shared other interviews that John had. I shared Solomon's testimony as individual, standalone testimony. So it's just so people could have both sides, so they could see both sides.
And that's really the reason that we did it, because we wanted to make sure that people that were using the excuse of not watching that other channel would still see their testimonies. That's kind of why we did it. It's like, okay, well, let's give them a voice on a channel that isn't that, so there's no more excuse, right? So thanks for sharing those, for sure.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just pretty clear. And of course, when I put that playlist up, I made it very clear when I put it up that I do not agree with all the offensive language that the some of the people giving the testimonies used. And it's I also was like just gave that as a caveat. But yeah, I did share that. And the thing is, Pastor Shelley, he preached that Sunday. In the morning, he had a meeting with his church. He did not have a sermon. He just had a meeting with his church that took 2 hours. And basically, that secret meeting was unveiled.
I do personally believe that at this time, though, it would be best for him to either take a leave of absence or step down as pastor and focus on his family. And here's the facts that I know. Number one is that his 4 oldest children are attacking him and against him. Okay? That includes his oldest, Solomon, Isaac, John, and Miriam. And I know Solomon because I personally talked to him about this. Okay? Additionally, I believe that when he made videos about his brother, that that was inappropriate. And it wasn't so much, some people say he was doxing his brother, which is true. I don't think that I personally don't really have a lot of fault for someone doxing their brother in this situation, even though it's illegal, but more about the timing. And so I believe someone who genuinely cared about their parent or their kid and was putting out a public statement for help would have done so right away. If you believe your kid was kidnapped, I do not believe you would wait a month to tell people or ask people for help. That being said, additionally, him and his family are both publicly attacking each other right now. And I believe that that is a huge distraction from the cause of Christ, and it's causing unnecessary strife and hatred for brethren. And there are good people on both sides of this issue right now. And what is really saddening for me is how these people are attacking each other. Now here's the thing, everything I just said is a fact. It is not my opinion. It is not something that I speculated. It's just stuff that I know to be absolutely true. And that's what I'm basing my decision on. I feel like, unfortunately, there's been a lack of care or concern for his children throughout this, based on the conversations I've had with him one-on-one. Additionally, there's been some inconsistent testimony between him and his wife in the private communications that I've had. Additionally, I personally believe that he's invoked God several times in a need to persuade, saying statements like, "As God is my witness," and in a private conversation with me saying, "I would stand before God right now and say I've done nothing wrong." And that disturbed me. I've talked to him multiple times, and I had a recent conversation with him to try to address what I'm saying to you right now. He did not want to have the conversation with me. He was unwilling to discuss this, and he said very alarming things to me. One of those is being that he's going to burn it all down, whatever that means. Additionally, I asked him one question. I said, "Do you practice spousal discipline?" And he said, whatever I do is consensual between me and my wife. And I asked no other questions. Okay? Whatever that means, I have no idea. And I will never know, and I never want to know. If all 4 of his most recent children that are 23, 21, 19, and 17 are making public attack videos against him, going on trainees channels, and then the dad and the mom are attacking their children and causing unnecessary strife and division, then I think that should be said, hey, maybe we should step aside because this isn't good for the cause of Christ.
Which I don't feel bad for hearing that secret meeting, because lots of people in that church, they heard that secret meeting, and they also were disappointed the next day when Pastor Jonathan Shelley completely flipped the script and said the opposite of what he said he was going to do in that meeting. So in that meeting, he said that he was going to call for Pastor Anderson to step down, and that he even made such statements in that audio where he's saying that I'm not going to change my mind and things like that. So which I was not part of that meeting. That meeting was revealed later on. So, but still, I was shocked when his statement came out on Monday. And Pastor Jonathan Shelley's sermon Sunday night was basically about being gracious on both sides. Like whenever there's a controversy, just be gracious to both sides. And but then everything kept going. I was really upset about that statement he made on Monday. But then on Tuesday, he had his Baptist Bias podcast, and the name of that podcast, the title of that podcast was Spiritual Warfare. And I knew it would have to do with current events because the post that he put out on Monday, a statement he made on Monday, started off saying spiritual warfare is ugly. And so I understood that that podcast would have something to do with what was going on. So the next day on Wednesday, I saw it in the morning. And in that podcast, at the 1 hour, 14-minute, 30-minute mark, he shows clips from old movies where husbands are spanking their wives. And here's a little bit where the gaslighting comes in. It's because previous to showing those clips, he goes and he shows how AI differentiates spousal abuse from spousal corporal discipline. And he says that the difference is the type of abuse, like the type of physical interaction going on there, whether it's like breaking bones or breaking teeth or what's going on, and if it's consensual or not. So he said, like in his case, he was saying it's not spousal abuse if it's consensual and if it doesn't cross a certain boundary. But he thinks spanking was okay, which is why he called it spousal corporal punishment, and he thinks it's okay specifically if it's consensual between the wife and the husband, which I do not agree with that either. But then he went on in the 1 hour, 14-minute, 30-minute mark to 30-second mark to show clips of old movies where the wives were being spanked by their husbands, but it was definitely not consensual because in most, if not all of those clips, the wives are shouting, "Stop, no, what are you doing?" Like all these things where
Yeah.
it's obviously not consensual. It's like John said in I think one of his interviews is you can't consent under duress. If you're being threatened, that there's no consent there. And
Yeah, those are films like, you know, John Wayne and all those kinds of things that, yeah, I've seen those films before. And lots of times you look at it and you're like, wow, those were different times, you know?
yeah, well, his point was that this was how culture used to be, and it is feminism and modern feminism that changed to where now it's something that's looked down on. And his point, like too, I will say to him that he does not preach that you should do that. He does not say that you should do that. He says that it's unwise and that you shouldn't do it. But when he explains, the times that I've heard him explain why you shouldn't is because you could be divorced by your wife because of the current legal situation, that yeah, you could be divorced, and also because just you could be accused of many things. Like it just wouldn't work out. But he still thinks that he still said in that video that he does not condemn it altogether. So if it was consensual and it doesn't cross a certain boundary, then he thinks that okay. So, but anyways, that those videos inflamed me. Like they basically made me so angry that I pretty much said I pretty much was like setting out to where I didn't want to be associated with him anymore. Just something he said later that, oh, he's just doing this because he doesn't want anything to do with me. Well, really, it's just because of that podcast. He's pretty much true as far as that goes. But what I did online is after seeing that, and like in the morning, Wednesday morning, in the afternoon, Pastor Shelley put a post where it was like Steven Anderson's family member like backing Steven Anderson up, and he shared it on his Facebook page, on his burner account. And when I saw that, I commented on that, and I said like, stop, something to the effect, not word for word, but something like, stop virtue signaling about how gracious you are to both sides when we all obviously know what side you're on. And it went like a back and forth through Facebook saying those things. He's saying like, who have I not been gracious to? And I said, well, you haven't been gracious to his kids. And the reason I said that is because he's railing against his kids. He's railing against Pastor
Right.
Anderson's kids, saying they're liars and all these things. And everyone who's on Pastor Anderson's side, they want to call the other side railers when there is someone railing in this situation, but I don't believe it's the people who are defending the kids.
Yeah, you touch on a really, really good point of the way that, I guess, I don't know if the proper word is gaslighting or what, but it's kind of like one side, it's a very hypocritical way to look at it, right? So let's call them railers since we're railing. Let's say that it's spiritual warfare when in actuality, I was thinking about this a lot, and they were talking a lot about, look, this spiritual warfare, and it's hitting, and it's hitting Pastor Anderson, and it's hitting, all these people because of what's going on. And they call spiritual warfare, look, see, the kids are coming against him. What I think is, you're right. There was spiritual warfare. There was an amazing ministry happening, and the spiritual warfare hit you when you started beating your kids, when you started beating your wife, and you allowed that spiritual warfare into your house, which is why we are here today, instead of putting the ministry first and thinking of your family first. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, sure there was, but it's not the way they're thinking about it, right? So maybe there's railing, but it's not the way they're thinking about it.
Well, here's the thing. Railing is just a false accusation where you're throwing against someone. But if the person that is telling you the truth, then it's not railing. So railing really depends on who is right in the situation. So what happened is eventually Pastor Shelley texted me and he was telling me like, why if you want nothing to do with me, why don't you just tell me? And he was going back and forth with me, and basically it got to the point where he told me that he gave me an ultimatum, and he said, you either repent of being a busybody, of being proud of being a busybody, and of your church member railing against me online. Because one of my church members, he was really defensive of me, and he basically attacked Pastor Shelley in one of the comments on Facebook. So I had to repent for like something he did, which didn't really make any sense. So he was saying those things, but I told him, I said, well, I could say those same things about you, because I could say, if I'm right about this situation, which I 100% believe I am, if I'm right, then you're the one who's proud. You're the one who's being a busybody in other men's matters, defending Pastor Anderson like way too much. And you're the one who's railing by attacking people who are defending the kids, saying that they're virtue signalers. Really, when he put that statement on Monday, I called him that Monday as well. I didn't mention that. I called him that Monday, and we had a long conversation that really went nowhere. But it was basically me telling him that, instead of defending me on Sunday when Pastor Anderson called me out publicly and was making fun of our church, the church that he started, really the one he was making fun of Pure Words Baptist Church. Instead of defending Pure Words Baptist Church, and instead of defending the new pastor, you made a statement the next day defending the person attacking the church you started. So I was like, I was very vocal to him, which maybe he saw that as pride, but really I saw it as open rebuke is better than secret love. I saw it as like giving him a chance to still get this right. And on Wednesday, after he gave me that ultimatum, and I said that I could accuse him of the same things, he basically said that he regretted ordaining me, that it was a mistake. And I kept trying to warn him, saying like, when the tide turns, I'm not gonna enjoy being right about what's going on, about the way you've handled this. But he pretty much through those text messages, he gave me that ultimatum. I was going to church that night because we have church Wednesday night at Pure Words, and I didn't want to like leave it at that, like separation through text message. So I called him, and we had a long conversation as well. And I started off apologizing for attacking him online and the way that I handled it, because there was also another comment that I made on someone. It was a post. It was a post I put on my Facebook page, on the Pure Words page, where I put Pastor Pozarski's statement, and underneath that on the comments on that post, someone was making fun of Pastor Pozarski, and he said, well, Anchor's the way, like insinuating, well, that's another church that's gone, like who cares? And since I was so enraged that Wednesday, I made a comment like about that person's physical appearance, just because I was so upset about that person attacking Pastor Pozarski. And Pastor Shelley, Pastor Shelley saw that as well, and other people were seeing that and trying to like use that against me. But I privately apologized to that person, and even with Pastor Shelley in that conversation on Wednesday afternoon, I apologized for the way I handled it, but I told him very clearly that I didn't apologize for my position because I can't apologize for my position. I think I'm right. Like I believe my position. So he excuse me. So he uh he he basically we just had this long conversation. It really went nowhere. But from that conversation, what I understood is that he was done with me. I even remember him saying those words that I'm done with you. And I understood that I didn't meet the ultimatum, so he's breaking fellowship with me because he had already given me that ultimatum. So that's what I announced at my church on Wednesday night. And I announced at my church that Pastor Shelley, that we were separating from him too because he could not condemn spousal corporal punishment. Another way I said it was that he condones it. And then some people in that meeting later on, they, out of loyalty to Pastor Shelley, they turned against me and they started spreading lies in the church and to a bunch of people saying that I was saying, like, as if I were saying that Pastor Shelley is preaching to beat your wife or something. Or really, all I said was that he doesn't condone that he condones spousal corporal punishment, that he thinks it's permissible, which is the opposite of condemn. So if you don't condemn, you condone. It's like opposites.
Which is easy
And
to see in any videos that he's doing anyway, right? I mean, like especially the Baptist
right,
bias one, right? Right.
right. Like I'm sorry that a Puerto Rican, like with English as a second language, has to explain grammar to people, but this is like explain vocabulary to people, but it's just condone and condemn are opposites. So, but they people in the church, because they did not like my statement, because we were separating from Pastor Shelley, the person who started the church, which understandably, right, is a shocking news. They started lying and railing against me online and just spreading misinformation, saying that like 90% of the church was gone and that all the pure words is in shambles and everything's gone and there's no, but they had no way to verify that because that was their last service. So they didn't know who showed up on Sunday, who showed up the next Wednesday, who showed up yesterday. Like they don't know because they're not there. So they're just spreading lies and misinformation and really just like stabbing me in the back. But the reason that they're doing that too is because Pastor Shelley enabled them. Pastor Shelley, in the next day on Thursday, he made a statement. Okay, let me say that first. On Wednesday night, I made the statement publicly to my church, but I also made a statement online. And in that statement, I said I am breaking fellowship with Pastor Shelley because of his views in this, just because I wanted to make sure, even with the ultimatum, like I was making the decision. But I spoke in that post and I said it's because of this ultimatum. And And so the thing is, people want to like play semantics, like who broke up with who or something. Like it doesn't matter. It's separating anyways.
Was it that Wednesday night that you took the screenshot of the account?
No, no, it was not that. It was not that Wednesday night. It was actually it's like the Saturday before. Well, actually the Saturday, that Saturday.
Okay.
So it was that Wednesday. I didn't take it that, but I was monitoring the account though.
So tell us a little bit about what happened there also, because I think that's really what the big deal is, right? What people are talking about now
Right.
online. And so
Yeah.
so now we know you went against him when it came to what was Steven Anderson, the children, that kind of thing. So then this whole breaking of fellowship, which I want to talk about a little bit later, but the breaking of fellowship. And then now you felt worried and started monitoring the church's bank account at this point, right?
Yeah, I started monitoring even before we broke fellowship, just because he was still the primary on the account. Obviously, he was supposed to have taken himself out ever since he ordained me. I could not do that because he was the primary. So I even me going to the bank and saying, "Hey, could you take out Pastor Jonathan Shelley?" I can't, like, because he has to be there present for that to happen. So he had to take himself out, and he said that he would. But then when we had the falling out on that Wednesday, in that phone conversation, he told me that the next day before the kids conference, he was going to go to the bank and he was going to take himself out because he wanted this whole transition done already. Like we're broken fellowship, everything's done. But obviously, he didn't keep that word. He didn't keep what he said. And I kept monitoring the accounts. because I knew that I was not expecting him to take money out. I was totally not expecting it, but I knew it was a possibility. So I knew it was wise to like check it out to make sure. And that's what made me more skeptical, was because that Saturday, after I broke fellowship with him, he was sending me text messages, telling me to just give back the church. Like, all the people are gone already, and you've broken the church, and just give it back to me. It doesn't make financial sense. But again, no, like, we haven't even had one service when he texted me that, so he couldn't know that. So, but that made me suspicious, and so yeah, and then I decided to send checks out to Solomon and Isaac Anderson, and I'll go ahead and say it. I sent a check out to John Anderson too, and I sent these checks out for $1,000 and for Isaac $2,000, which some people are asking, like, how come you sent Isaac two separate checks of 1,000 and one of them says just for you? Well, some people, like, people may not realize, but Isaac just like had a child, and so there's justifications to that. There's people trying to assume a lot of things. But the thing is that the reason I sent those checks out is because Pastor Shelley, when Pastor Anderson preached for us in in August, he he told me to give Pastor Anderson a check of $1,000 in his name. And I had already been seeing like the bank records, just like getting ready for the ordination, kind of like knowing where we are financially. And I was like seeing that there were checks that were being given out to pastors, and Pastor Anderson specifically, over the years for $1,000 each time he came to preach. So after everything was revealed about the abuse, I just kind of felt like I wanted to clear Pure Word's like conscience, or like really just clean the innocent blood of like helping an abuser so many years. And I felt it completely justified to give some of the abuse victims a love offering, a charity offering. And I decided to make it a similar amount to what Pastor Anderson was getting. And nobody knew about it. Nobody would have known about it. My church members didn't know about it. Some people were upset about that because I didn't ask my church. Well, that's not something that anybody does in any new IFB church. The pastor doesn't go to any congregation and ask them what he can do with the money in any new IFB church that I know of. And and as the legal director of the church, I had every right to decide that, so it was not illegal. And some people were upset, saying that there was a misappropriation of funds, or that if you give this money out, you can't just give it to any individual, or if you give more than $600, that you have to give a 1099 or whatever. But all of that is just misinformation. It's not true. Churches are charitable organizations that can give money away for like to anybody the director chooses. It's not limited to just a few people, or just like they have to be the preacher. Actually, if you kind of study it from what I've researched, when it's a service, when it's like a service done and you give more than 600, that's when you have to give a 1099. But if it's just a charity offering, like you're not receiving services, then you don't have to give a 1099 out. But obviously, it will make sense. You have to give a 1099 out when someone's working for it, because they're a non-employee service work in the church. Then you have to give them a 1099. So I would kind of like, I'd like wonder if all these preachers and people who have been getting more than $600 every time they come to preach, I wonder if they've been receiving 1099s.
Yeah. So basically they're getting paid to go preach at your place, right? So they're getting this
Yeah.
offering to go preach there, which is it's not something that doesn't happen, right? Like, it happens everywhere. It happens in tons of
Right.
different denominations. It's never, I mean, depending on the denomination, it's never really as much as $1,000. But
Right.
so you gave to his children because you felt this conscience. It was your conscience that said, we've been giving to this guy every single time $1,000 all through the bank account, and you felt bad that you were giving $1,000 to a child abuser, and so you wanted to rectify that by giving some to his kids.
Yeah, because people are trying to say, like, why would you give money to someone who supposedly earns more than 100,000? But here's the thing: if you hear their testimonies, it's not like their father was really helping them financially at all throughout their life. And also, even if they did have money, like this was just really just a charity offering to be able to be a blessing to them while they're coping with the stress of having to expose their parents online. And here's I wanted to note this too is that yes, that Pure Words would give uh, Pastor Anderson $1,000 every time he'd come to preach, but also what I had heard from Pastor Shelley was that all the times he came to preach, Faithful Baptist Church was covering his expenses too. So don't just assume. People might just be assuming like, oh, that's to cover his traveling expenses and all that, because that's a bad assumption.
So let me ask you this. So there have been people online that I think actually it was Steven Anderson on his Facebook page pushed out after Jonathan Shelley announced this that you see my children are gaining monetary money because they're out there speaking. So in other words, they're making up lies. They're doing all these things so that they can get money. I know I didn't give them any money, right? But because you did that, and now it's out there, now people are looking at it that way. What do you say to them?
I say that's ridiculous. Like, who would say that I set them up for life by giving them $1,000 in today's economy? Like, no, it doesn't make any sense. And it just really shows how their side is grasping at straws. It's just like trying to find any reason to make Pastor Anderson look good. Because if you look at the dates of the checks that Pastor Shelley exposed, which again, I didn't want anyone to know, not even my wife knew, because I wanted it to be a thing that where God sees it and God blesses Pure Words because of it. But he exposed it. If you look at the checks, like they were just like this past week. So it's like weeks after they already gave their testimony. Why would I be paying them weeks after? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Why would I be paying them so little too?
Right. Right. So then it happens that Pastor Jonathan Shelley takes money out of the account.
Yes, he takes money out of the account and he uses as justification the fact that he saw that the checks were going to Solomon and Isaac. And what that lets you know is that he was monitoring the account very carefully, looking for any excuse to take that money out because Solomon and Isaac's checks were deposited on Thursday night and the bank account was depleted on Friday morning. So that lets you know that it was just a quick, looking for the littlest excuse, and he was like monitoring it constantly. And so the way I found out is because I was just checking on Monday morning. I was at work and I was just checking on Monday morning, and I saw that it was at a negative value, and I automatically knew what happened. And I texted Pastor Shelley and I said, I'm gonna expose you for this. At first, I was at work. I was busy, so I couldn't really post anything. So I just sent the pictures to Isaac real quick by text and say, hey, post this. He was trying to use as justification that I was sending money to Miriam and to John and to Isaac and Solomon. But the thing is that all the checks were made out to Isaac and Solomon. And there was another check that John didn't cash in time, unfortunately for him, which was sent to John. And so that doesn't make any sense. He tried saying that I was aiding and abetting a runaway and that he was going to have to file me to the police. But that doesn't make any sense. Just because I give another check to someone who has like a baby in the house and I write in one check just for you and the other one I just write his name charity, like that doesn't incriminate me at all. So what I did was not illegal at all. But what Pastor Shelley did was very illegal. It was very illegal.
Before you say that, how much money did he take out?
He took $25,000 out of the Pure Words bank account.
And just to be clear, where did that money come from? Is that money he gave? Is that money that was supposed to be his, or is that
No.
where does that come from?
So that was money that was basically gained throughout the year. And here's the thing about Pure Words Baptist Church: I do not gain a salary. I do not gain a salary. I have not gained a salary. So, basically, the reason, again, I think the reason that he chose me is because of that. Is because he knew I was self-sustaining and that Pure Words wouldn't have to pay me. But there was a previous employee that was getting paid $3,000 a month, and I'm not going to say his name just for security's sake. And so even if you just think about it, like logically, we're in the month of October, and you have $3,000 that you're saving by having someone who's not getting paid. There's $30,000 just right there. And in that video that he made against me, he was trying to say that I was misappropriating funds. He took out the $25,000, and that was very illegal. The reason why it was illegal is because the transfer of authority was already made to me legally. So I am the director of Pure Words Baptist Church. There's 3 directors, and I am a director, but he was not a director. He basically fired himself when he put me, and he signed those documents. So he had no legal right to empty out all those funds. He had no legal right to close the account, which is what he did. He closed the bank account. He had no legal right to do any of that. It was very illegal. It was actually a 3rd-degree felony of embezzlement that has a charge that has as punishment, besides having to pay everything back and fines and fees, could have a punishment of 2 to 10 years in prison because of it.
So according to him, he thought you had possibly given money to Miriam and she's a runaway. And so then he was trying to say, oh, I have to say something. I have to do something about this. So did you go to like a lawyer? What did you do to figure all this out?
So the first thing I did was contact Chase Bank to see if there was anything I could do to make a stop payment, but it was too late. He had already closed the account. I still had access to the records and everything, but I couldn't do anything to stop the payment. And because since he was a primary on the account, I couldn't do anything in that regard. But as soon as everything came out, I was being contacted by like attorneys, and specifically one person, I'm not going to say his name, who's like really became my legal representative to let me know the legality of everything. And automatically, just like coming into everything happening, I knew that what he had done through that other person, what he had done was illegal, was not right, and that I had a lot of power to incriminate him. So, but what ended up happening little by little, I've been very vocal as far as my stand goes against Pastor Anderson, and even like standing up and rebuking Pastor Shelley because of his views on all this, because here's the thing, they have been very vocal. So it makes sense for me to want to cut ties and make it very clear where I stand, because I was associated to them as a New IFB church and as being someone ordained by Pastor Anderson. That's why I've had to do this. But when all this happened with the bank account, I became very quiet online. I stopped answering comments. And after I made all my posts, like explaining the situation, I stopped making posts. But the reason was because it became a legal situation, and I wanted to make sure that I did not say anything to help the other side. And Pastor Shelley, during that morning on Friday morning, he was texting me back and forth, and he was basically trying to get me to revoke the director's document that he had already signed, but like just in a fit of emotion by talking with me. And he was trying to also, I understood from my conversation with him, he was trying to get me to somehow admit that I helped Miriam when I did not write a check to Miriam. I wrote a check to Isaac. And when I understood that he was trying to catch me in my words, I stopped texting him. And then after that, it was my legal representative who was talking with him back and forth. And my legal representative let him know the severity of the situation.
Wow. So your legal representative went and talked to him, or at least he called him or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, that happened on Saturday. On Saturday, communication started between my legal representative and him. And because here's the thing, and some people don't know this, that he took all that money out, but besides doing that, he broke the lease of the church with the rental company property management company.
I was going to ask you about that because he did mention that in his video, right? He said, I cut the lease off because my name was on it. I took the money because I thought it was right. Yeah.
Which was not right either, because yes, his name is there as tenant, but also in the business name on the lease is called Pure Words Baptist Church. So he wasn't fully right on that either. And going to church that day, I knew that something would have happened because he broke that lease. And I went to church, and I even shared online a picture of a padlock on the door. And what disgusted me about me making those posts with the amount of supposed, like God-fearing Christians rejoicing over a padlock being put on a church, a King James only soul-winning church. That's what disgusted me. Of course, I wasn't making any comments just out of discretion, but I was disgusted by so many comments and the rejoicing and the glory that was going on. It's a disgrace on these people. But he was not right. And you know what I found out contacting the property management company was that they were not the ones who put that lock on that door.
Oh,
And it was not the landlord either. So someone either went or someone was paid to go put that padlock on there
maybe
by Pastor Shelley.
perhaps somebody that disagreed with you that was part of the church before or something.
Yes, probably someone who he poisoned against me.
So let me ask you
And
this: if someone that was not the landlord put that padlock in, I assume everything from the church stayed stuck in there, right? Do you have the legal right to just go break it? I mean, it's no one. I mean,
yes,
whose is that? You know?
according to my legal advisor, yes. So and then also, uh, the landlord. I contacted the landlord, and they said that this was something between me and Pastor Shelley, and that the lease was going all the way to the end of the month. So I'm not gonna say how we had access to it, but we do have access to it. And yeah,
So what did your legal advisor tell Shelley, and what's going to be the result now?
so what my legal advisor was telling Shelley is basically the severity of the situation, and Pastor Shelley, he started to understand it. Especially, I think maybe my silence spooked him, because I'm usually very vocal and just like just really communicating with him all the time whenever he wants to talk to me. And so what was started happening is he wanted to talk to me personally instead of going through my legal advisor. And he started sending me texts, like kind of like trying to make amends and trying to somehow fix things without having to talk to the legal advisor, with the legal representative. And I just kept blowing him off and not answering his text messages and making it clear that he had to go through my legal representative for everything. And uh, automatically on Saturday, he wanted to make an agreement where he was going to give the money back and have specific conditions. He wanted as one of the conditions that I was not going to file any criminal claim against him.
So he agreed to give the money back as long as you don't file any criminal claim against him, which to me says he understands that he's in trouble.
Yeah, well, it was in the agreement, in his conditions, he wanted it where neither side could file civil or criminal claims against each other. So it was kind of like him trying to make him look like, hey, I won't report you if you don't report me or something like that. But I haven't done nothing wrong, so I have nothing to fear when it comes to that. Like I have like totally the law is on my side, and the thing is too is that it's illegal to have a document that says you're not going to report crime. So that one it didn't work out that way anyways, because it's illegal to write a document and sign and say I'm not going to report a crime, because crimes are supposed to be reported. And so another thing I wanted to say is that the statute of limitations for that third degree felony embezzlement is 7 years, and it starts off at the discovery of the crime. So not the crime itself, but it's those 7 years start at the discovery of the crime, and it's 7 years. So what that means for those who don't understand is that once a person commits third degree felony embezzlement, they can be charged for that 7 years from the point that that crime is discovered, up to 7 years. So, uh, yeah, he tried making an agreement, having conditions, but really we didn't respond or sign anything or do anything, because we kind of wanted to leave him in the hot seat, just kind of like leave him festering with this concept of maybe that he's going to jail, and just to kind of like give us time to consider everything as well. And then this morning, Monday, throughout the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, he kept contacting me, trying to just work things out with me and not through my legal advisor. Which I just at this point I didn't trust him to just talk with me about everything, because I knew he would maybe try to make me say something to incriminate myself, even though I've done no crime, or just try to twist my words somehow on a recorded phone line or something. So on Monday, this morning, he just without making an agreement or signing anything, he told us that he's going to send us a check for $25,000 made out to Pure Words Baptist Church. And this is the first time I'm announcing it, so I guess this will be the first time people are hearing this. But he's gonna write out the check and give it to us. He's already like made that clear. And some people might be wondering, well, why am I saying this when I haven't received the money or like the money's not in the bank yet? Well, it's because I have nothing to fear. I have nothing to lose, and it would be a bad move on him to, uh, it wouldn't look good for him if after having texted and talked and everything said that he's going to do that, then backtrack on that. So I really don't have anything to fear. And one thing is that I did want to mention is after as soon as he did that on Friday, I set it up. I pretty much almost immediately, a few hours later, started a GoFundMe for the church, because a lot of people don't know, but Pure Words Baptist Church has been persecuted heavily by the LGBTQ community for the past like year and a half. So this is not just like persecution we're receiving from the ungodly people in the world. Like this, now we're like really receiving persecution from both sides, from Christians, non-Christians alike. And they actually had a field day yesterday, Sunday, because everything they wanted all along, all throughout these year and a half of protesting, is for the landlord to kick us out. And they've been protesting the landlord, the property management companies, that their offices for the past year and a half. They've been protesting bi-weekly, so every other week. And the management, as they're like done with it too. So whenever Pastor Shelley called them or talked to them about all this, that's why they were so quick to just get us out of there and like break the lease right away, is because they just had it with the protesters. But the thing is, Pastor Shelley, when he did all this, he put us in a situation that that he's been in before. He put us in a situation to where we can't, like, it's really hard to find a rental company that will rent out to us, because they know that they're gonna have protesters tied with us. And at the same time, uh like, we're just like kicked out, kind of like evicted, the same way he was evicted.
So you're not going to be able to get that church back after this month.
That property, no, that lease here, even we have until the end of the month, because really when he broke the lease, it was until the end of October. But I didn't want to go back anyways. I don't want to go back anyways, because the property management company has suffered a lot already because of the protesters. And I don't want to do that to them. I don't want the protesters on one Sunday to be rejoicing that we're finally gone, and then the next service we're there, and the property management company to face severe persecution because of it. So we're pretty much just meeting at undisclosed locations for now, because the reason I'm not giving the locations out is because I don't want the protesters to follow us there and kick us out. So, and Pastor Shelley knows what kind of situation it is, because when he was evicted, he would have to go to meet at random locations, hotels, and different locations, just to try to have church. And he'd get kicked out of places too, until he finally had a church building. And what's funny too is this whole situation is similar to when he had money stolen from his bank account by people, and those same people it's really super similar situation, because those same people were previous directors of the church that took hold of the bank account because they were directors, and took out the money. It's like he's literally doing to us. He did to us what the persecutors and haters of God were doing to him years before. And I'm not sure if he realized that, but that's what he did.
So basically, to sum this part up, is he came against you because you were fighting for the children and you disagreed with him. He went back and forth and kind of was wishy-washy on his stance behind the scenes, and as opposed to in front of the scenes. We all saw his I don't know if it's the last sermon, but the one where he's like explaining why he said certain things behind the scenes and certain things in front of people. And that, no, I was just trying to process it. I was just that kind of thing. And then he came against you You guys disagreed with that. You broke fellowship. He takes the money. He puts out a statement that you're the one that's wrong and doing illegal things, and then finds out he's the one doing illegal things, and now he's going to give you a check back to the church.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say is that I have no disagreement. Like I haven't had any contention or discord or like disagreement or public dispute with Pastor Shelley before this point, and he even admits that. Like we were great. Like
Yeah, he said even at one point. Yeah, he even said at one point, "Oh yeah, I don't know why all of a sudden this is happening. We've been fine before."
I think he might be assuming that I had some kind of secret hatred towards him or resentment, and that I'm using this as a means to get back at him or something. But I really have no resentment. Like really, I haven't changed my doctrine. I'm still going soul winning. Like we're still King James only. We're still a Bible preaching church. Like I haven't changed. I'm not a heretic, but because I stand against abuse, like am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? Like it's one of those situations. And I've been called snake. I've been called Judas. I've been called a jerk, prideful jerk. I've been called many things.
Well, and you had your church be made fun of, and if we take Pastor Anderson's prayer about all of us helping his children, he wishes we were all dead now. Those kinds of things, right? Against you.
Yeah, it's like I've had my church split because the pastor, besides talking with the people, Pastor Shelley, besides talking with the people and talking bad about me and spreading misinformation and lies about me, besides that, he publicly in his last Wednesday, he was publicly praising members from Pure Words for not going to my church. And he was saying things such as, well, at least I taught them something right, not to follow some arrogant jerk. And again, the only difference of opinion I have from him, like major difference of opinion, is just this huge moral issue of abuse. I have not changed my stance in core doctrines at all. So so I don't know what caused him to go so much against me. Maybe it's because he ordained me and it makes him look bad that he just ordained someone and now that person is making us or like has a different opinion than he does. I have no personal like animosity. I actually think Pastor Shelley, for the most part, is a good pastor. For the most part, I think that he's a man of God that has been serving God and that has won many souls to Christ and has done right things in the past. But I just think he needs to get this one issue right. He needs to be on the side of right, and he needs to stop persecuting people who openly have a different opinion than he does about this.
Well, do you
And
think it's because, I mean, according to the recording with John that was released of him, he's got several people in his church that were, as it said, wife beaters, right? Um, I mean, do you think he practices that kind of spousal corporal punishment as well?
no, I don't think he does. And I don't think, for the most part, I don't think people in his church do. And I'm not going to assume that. I think really it's just like a difference of opinion as far as Bible goes. I don't know if they're so far against feminism that they try to blame feminism for everything. And now they're trying to blame the fact that spousal corporal punishment isn't a thing on feminism. Maybe they're going too far on some doctrines and it's taking them to some unbiblical extremes. But yeah, when he says that there's no verse in the Bible that is against spousal corporal punishment, I think that's absurd. But again, for the most part, as far as doctrine goes, I'd say that he's solid on lots of doctrines. So it's just this he needs to get right.
So what happens now? Like, what is the? I guess you wait for that check. Are you going to continue to be separated from them until all this gets resolved? Until we see who's on the right side of history? I guess.
So what's gonna happen is me and him were talking about this recently. Is that once that check passes through, I am 100% willing to like take posts down of things that he's done. Because here's the thing: once he sends the money back, uh, that's him showing good faith in the situation. I'm not gonna attack him for that, and that's why I haven't been trying to harp on him or even saying a lot of things because of I kind of wanted to give him an opportunity to rectify the situation, and I think that's what he's planning on doing. And well, I think what the plan going forward, as far as both of us goes, is we want to seek peace. We want to seek where we can have a difference of opinion and still like not be attacking each other. I've already been clear to him that I do not want to be associated with him as far as fellowship goes, as far as like being super close or being really good friends because of his stance on this issue and because of what he believes about this. I just think it really mars the name of Christianity in the light of the world. And I don't want my church to be affected by that stance. But as far as everything else goes, his soul winning, his Bible preaching for the most part is good, and I don't want to be publicly attacking someone who's like preaching the word of God and getting people saved. The only reason I've been vocal throughout all this is not because I hate Pastor Shelley, it's just because he's been really vocal defending abuse, and I was really closely tied to him because he ordained me a month ago. So sometimes people, they need to get this, they need to like understand this, that it's not an independent church issue. If everyone that is labeled a new IFB church is affected by it, and there's people in my church leaving because of it, it's not an independent church issue. This whole Pastor Anderson kid situation is not an independent church issue. It is affecting many, many churches. And Pastor Shelley's stance was not an independent church issue that didn't affect me, because it affected my reputation in the eyes of the world and in the eyes of every other independent fundamental Baptist church in the world. So, uh, so the plan going forward is hopefully that we can just have peace and kind of put everything behind us, and just stop attacking each other and just not be best friends. Who knows what happens in the future? Maybe if he repents and he takes back, maybe if he apologizes for splitting my church and telling people not to go to the church that he started, maybe if he apologizes for all the railing accusations he said against me, comparing me to Judas and Diotrephes, maybe if he repents about his stance on spousal abuse and child abuse, then maybe in the future we could have good fellowship and be friends again. But the way it is right now, uh, I don't want to be associated to him.
Well, and you're looking at the way that that him giving back that money is in good faith. I would there's some out there, and maybe it's even my opinion, that no, he's just giving you back your money, and he might know that there was some legal repercussions coming at him, right? So if you're willing to take down all those posts, then I mean, I would say to you, just make sure he takes down all his posts, because those two are not together, right? Like, him giving you back the money is because he stole it, right? So it has nothing to do with the posts that were going on before that.
Well, I want to be clear. The reason why I said I would take down the post is because he basically made an agreement that if he gives back the money and the money clears, that we would both take down our posts attacking each other. But I would still leave up my statement where I'm disassociated from him, obviously. But
Right.
that we would just kind of like try to let bygones be bygones and just kind of like let it be water under the bridge. Just like, okay, it happened, you fixed it, that's it. Like, I'm not gonna keep bringing it up. You're a brother in Christ. I don't have bitterness towards you. And if it were like a mutual thing where we're both trying to rectify the situation, then I think it would be a good look in the eyes of the world, and even in it's lots of Christian churches, if they saw that there's some movement towards peace in the midst of all this chaos.
You mentioned that there are people that left the church because he told them not to go there, that kind of thing. Were there any people that you think would have left the church if you hadn't have taken this stance against Steven Anderson and what was going on?
Well, yeah, there was a few people in the church that were already, that told him like they were already kind of on their way out, and I want to make it clear, like the people who left, not all of them. Some of them are just being quiet and they left quietly. They're probably thinking that they want to see the end of the matter before they keep going to my church. But some of them who left, are just like really big flatterers and troublemakers, who, when I made that statement in church, like, don't talk to me about it, but then the next day are just like stabbing me in the back. And here's the thing, Pastor Shelley, he's kicked people out of his church, or at least threatened to kick them out, for just liking one of my posts. And I have not kicked anyone out, even though they've been stabbing me in the back and criticizing me online, because I want to give people the opportunity to be like, to have a different opinion and still serve God in their area. But they're the most faithful members of my church are like still going to church. The ones who were like really faithful, And even actually, we had a family come back because of my stand. So people were saying like, so there were some false accusations saying like, oh, there's only one family there, like it's just you and another family, but that's just like completely not true because uh again, these people, they're not there in the meetings, they're not there in our services, so they wouldn't know that anyways.
So you mentioned something, it's not independent if other people have control, right? And so this whole thing is set up in, I think, everyone on the outside of the NIFB, I can tell you this, really looks at this as though Steven Anderson created his own denomination. It's now called the NIFB, and he gets to dictate who's in it and who isn't in it. And whoever disagrees with him are the ones not in it. So would you say now that if it continues this way, probably your church is not going to be classified as NIFB?
Yeah, I made the statement at my church. I said if being new IFB is agreeing and approving of everything Steven Anderson teaches and does, then I have never been new IFB because I've always like there have always been things that I'm not 100% in agreement with him. So if that's what it means, then I was never new IFB.
Well, and then the idea of being independent fundamental Baptist, right? And they send you out to go and do this church. Meanwhile, they have control and they're constantly looking at things, which I don't know if Steven Anderson does that to Pastor Shelley or not, where Pastor Shelley thought he could do that to you, but that doesn't prove that they're independent. I mean, you know what I mean? That shows that that's not an independent. They didn't send you off and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's how it works with Faithful Word and Steadfast Baptist Church. I don't think that's how the dynamic they had going on. But it was something that Pastor Shelley did, which I didn't approve of, and I really had no control of because there was nothing I could do as far as like taking the primary account holder from a bank account, changing it myself. So, but again, some people have talked to me and said like, "Well, why did you make your stand even knowing that you could possibly do this? Like it was a possibility." It was like, well, the thing is, when I get to heaven, I'm not gonna go to heaven and have to give account to Jesus. I'm sorry, to Jonathan Shelley for my ministry and for what I decided to do with the church. I'm gonna have to give account to Jesus Christ. And like, what money, the building, all these things don't really matter. What matters is what Jesus Christ thinks about the situation. And if he's approving of what I say, and if he's on my side, then there's like all these other things are just circumstantial.
Well, and it's like you said, and it's not just the money thing, right? Like it's not just overseeing the money and then the money have been taken out. I guess the idea of we get to dictate what happens in your church, even though we're all supposed to be independent, right? Like if Pastor Anderson decides that Jonathan Shelley, he's going to break a covenant with him, he starts telling people not to go to that church. Anybody that believes in me can't go to that church anymore, or else, you know what, you guys can leave too. You're no longer a part of this church. You're no longer a part of the NIFB. It's like what you're saying and what I've said in previous videos. If Faithful Word Baptist Church wants to keep him as pastor, whatever, that's between them, right? But it's bigger than that. It's he's out online. He's constantly, for the past 15 years or more, 20, you know what I mean? Been spewing out things online where he's gone against other pastors, he's taken them down, said they were disqualified, all these kinds of things, to where it just proves that it, on the outside, it always looked, well, I guess they're not really independent churches. If he gets to go in there and tell a church, it doesn't matter if you think he's qualified or you want to keep him, he's disqualified and that's it, right? So, but he won't
Yeah.
allow that to happen to him. If all of you got together and did it, that the easy way out is, well, they're not a part of us anymore, so they can't say anything. And so
Yeah.
that's my whole take. That's what I'm wondering your thoughts on that before we end is independent fundamental Baptist, is the NIFB even running independent at all? How do you feel how they're all interconnected? I mean, I know they don't control you on a day-to-day basis, but I mean, they oversee, and as you said, it really affected your church.
Yeah, the thing is, since I was newly ordained, it made it easier for me to come out with my statements because I wasn't like, you know, already going like knowing all these pastors, specifically and like going to their church and preaching for them. Like I didn't really have that much to lose as some other pastors because they had the peer pressure to like not say anything because Pastor Anderson might say something against me. Or to me, it was like I'm independent. Like, all right, let him be angry at me. I don't care. but yeah, the new IFB has become like a denomination in the sense that you have to agree or else you're kicked out. And they will say, "Oh, you're not new IFB now," which that really makes it like a weird denomination, and it makes it kind of like a cult of personality, which
Right.
some people will think that it's wrong to call it a cult. Well, it might be wrong to call it a cult, but it is in some aspects cult like.
Yeah.
And to make it where one man can determine what the fellowship of churches has to believe, or else they're kicked out of that fellowship of churches, and have that intense peer pressure to where even pastors who know what's right don't want to speak up because they're scared of being preached against by this popular preacher. That really makes it to where it's not independent churches anymore. It's really affiliated churches.
It's a network at the very least, a network of churches.
Yeah, a
Right.
network that builds off of peer pressure. And I think I wholeheartedly believe that Pastor Shelley, as far as Pastor Shelley goes, that God put me in his life to be able to give him peer pressure to do the right thing. 'Cause he had a lot of peer pressure from all the other pastors and from Pastor Anderson and from even people in his church and from a lot of people in his church to defend Pastor Anderson. But at the same time, he had peer pressure from my side to do the right thing and defend the abused. I mean, because he knew that if he goes against me, or if we were to break ties, then it would look bad on him because he just ordained me. So I think what's funny about this whole thing too, sorry if I'm like going on different topics, but I think what's funny about this thing too is that like people are attacking me saying I should step down because I gave a charity offering to someone, but they don't think that it's okay for a wife beater and a child abuser to step down. And so it's just a little bit hypocritical, and they think that someone who's been in the ministry for years beating their wife, it shouldn't step down, but someone who literally, like, someone just approved their qualifications a month ago, like someone just already reviewed me and like I passed every test, like that I should step down. How does that make any sense? And people keep trying to discredit the testimonies of the victims of the abuse and say, well, oh, why are you giving money to a Nazi? Or don't you know John's lifestyle? Or don't you know what Solomon does? Or look at Solomon's earrings or things like that. They're worldly kids. But here's the thing. The Bible talks about the fact in Colossians where it says, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. And what would discourage a Christian for living for God more than seeing their pastor dad beat their mom and beat their younger siblings. Like, the Bible is very clear that if you provoke your children to anger, it's going to discourage them. And I wholeheartedly believe that what the abused, what Solomon, Isaac, John, and Miriam need is for more people to speak up and for there to be actually something done about this, so that this chapter of their life can finally be closed, and they could have some closure, and they can have some healing, and then they could live for God like they should. So people who keep trying to attack their personal lives, they don't have any grace, they don't have any mercy on them. They don't really appreciate or understand their situation. And I wholeheartedly believe that once this chapter of life is closed, once the justice that needs to be done because of the actions, once the justice is done and there's closure, I wholeheartedly believe that these children will have more of an opportunity and more reason to love and to serve God and to get things right in their life.
Absolutely. And you can see glimpses of that already. They're just so, but they're right now in the middle of all this. That what else can they concentrate on, right? People call them out for not reading their Bible. I say, well, you don't know if they're not reading their Bible. They've expressed that they still believe. They've expressed that they still believe in Jesus Christ. They still, they just probably are never going to take their father's stance on beating. And so that's just what it is, right? Like on the abuse part of it, of course, they'll spank their kids, all that kind of thing. But there's they seem to be well spoken. They seem to know what they're talking about when it comes to those things, and I find it just fascinating. And I know it's like cult like, right? That you can get up there and say nobody in my church is against me, but everybody that went against you, you kicked out of the church, you excommunicated. So yeah, of course, because either they're afraid to, or they're just on your side and they're just as guilty as you for not looking into this or not standing up for the innocent, which are children, right? So
Yeah. Besides, they're creating an echo chamber. That's what they're doing. They're creating where any other opinion or ideas are kicked out, so that they keep validating themselves. An echo chamber, not just in their church, but also online, by kicking people out of their pages and from their personal profiles, so that the only thing that people who support them see is the people supporting them. And it's really a disgusting thing to do, and it creates a toxic church culture to where any disagreement will get you labeled as a railer and a Judas, which I don't think is right.
right. Well, do you have anything else that you'd like to say before we end?
No, I just did want to say again that I believe there's been a lot of toxic and bad things, and just bad things done from both sides. People who believe the witnesses, and people who believe Pastor Anderson. And I just want to remind everybody that the actions that we take and the way that we respond to each other is giving a bad view of Christianity to the world, and specifically to the enemies of God, to where Christians' reactions to a lot of the things that are going on, and to the attacks going between each other, are really causing the enemies of God to blaspheme. So I just want everyone to remember that the enemies are rejoicing over you attacking your Christian brethren. The enemies are rejoicing over you being happy that a church building was locked. The enemies are rejoicing that that building was locked and that the money was stolen. All these things are just giving a black eye to Christianity. And even though Pastor Anderson has done many, many, many good things, and I believe he is saved, and I believe he has been used by God in a great way, I do believe that there's potential for all of this to cause way more damage than good in the long run. And that the bad things that can result from this whole situation could outweigh the good that he's done in the past. So just please be everyone, just try to have peace. Try not to be too attacking each other. Just don't be trolls online. Don't feed the trolls. Like, have your opinion, but don't be disrespectful. If the Bible offends, then let the Bible offend. If the gospel offends, let it offend. But let's not be unnecessarily offensive ourselves.
Yeah, and I want to thank you and really remind people of what you said earlier, that you recognized when you were wrong posting certain things online, and you asked for repentance. You said sorry to Pastor Shelley and privately that one pastor, and I think that's the way it should be, right? Okay, maybe I went a little bit too far here, right? But I think what's really causing people to really react the way they react is just there's this natural reaction to, oh man, this guy beats children. There's still 8 children in the house. What do we do about this, right? And so there's a natural, like,
Right.
visceral reaction to that of people want to see justice.
Yeah, I totally understand that the reason people are reacting is because they do believe their position. So this is very like a yeah, I understand. We should be gracious to each other in the sense that we shouldn't like we should give our opinion and not be unnecessarily offensive. But I do want to be clear that this is a very divisive issue. So there's no being in the middle ground. There's no being in the fence. Like, you're either defending the abused or the abusers. And whoever's wrong in this situation, which I do not believe, I 100% do not believe I'm wrong. Whoever's wrong in this situation is going to regret standing on their side.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you so much for doing this interview. I'm so glad that it's getting rectified, and then we can give this good news report, right? That money is going back to you. and just keep us updated. Keep us updated on whether or not it does and what's going to happen from here on. But we're going to keep moving on with everything else that's going on.
All right. Thank you very much.
God bless you, brother.
All right. God bless.